The Public Finance Authority met earlier today, Wednesday, with discussion centering primarily on two resolutions to give more time to two consulting firms to complete their tasks. First, Director of the Office of Disaster Recovery, Adrian Williams, explained why Witt O'Brien's LLC needed a contract extension of 120 days for disaster recovery consulting services.
We're at the end of the contract term, and we have chosen not to have a renewal of the contract, but we'll go back out for bid for those contracts. But in the interim, we're asking for a 120-day no-cost time extension for that contract while we go through the solicitation process. The solicitation has been let with a return date for bids on December 16, 2022. This 120-day time frame would allow us to review bids, bring a recommendation before this body to ratify a new contract for these services. We've revised the requests for these services based on where we are 5 years later in the disaster to be clear on what our needs are and scope our contract based on deliverables, performance indicators, and ensure that we have the appropriate costs that we deem reasonable to be able to provide these services as we move forward with the recovery.
Williams made it clear that the adjustment would not attract any additional costs, but would merely provide more time to complete the solicitation process. However, members of the board, including its chair, Governor Albert Bryant Jr., questioned whether the millions of dollars already spent on the contract had produced satisfactory outcomes.
We satisfied with the product, not the cost.
Well,
like we would always want to pay less.
We have seen a significant cost savings in terms of what we've been able to garner for obligations, and with the replacement for the wastewater lines, even the very first school, FEMA initially offered us $70 million. We were able to double that. So these are some of the services that tangible results for having the consultants on board that we were able to realize.
Because if they have the knowledge, the relationship of what we need, will a new contract or a new consultant be able to do what they do?
One of our concerns that initially led to the decision for us to go back out to bid was on a particular project with WAPA, where WAPA had executed standby contracts for some of the work that was done, and FEMA questioned whether or not we're long past the emergency situation that we were in early after the storm. Are we really doing what we can do to determine cost reasonableness? And that took WAPA through a long process that eventually they prevailed, but it really impacted their ability to execute their projects timely because those projects were held up for over a year, which ultimately costed them in increased costs because of the delay of time. We want to be able to be preventative and not get into a situation where we're again trying to defend our decision not to go back out to bid and get really costs that reflect the time that we're in right now.
Board member Keith O'Neill asked how they would transition to a new consultant, given how long the previous one had been immersed in the recovery. The topic was then moved to the executive session of the meeting, though Williams did share her thoughts.
Because of where we are currently in the disaster, we're at a point where we're moving forward in the next 5 years. So if we look at the next phase of the recovery, it's really how do we put together all of the funding sources to build a transformative plan, not in the phase of getting the funds where we were 5 years ago. We're really in the phase of executing these multi-million-dollar contracts.
Another 120-day no-cost time extension of contract terms was also approved for Ernst & Young Puerto Rico LLC, also for disaster recovery consulting services.